Hello there, and welcome to The Sleepy Scientist. Tonight we drift into the quiet architecture of the sky, not into storms or thunder, but into the gentle realm of birds, where feathers meet wind and where motion becomes softness. Birds live between worlds, grounded like living leaves when they rest, and airy as drifting clouds when they rise. They do not force their way through the sky. They are carried by it. Their wings unfold like a silent invitation to breathe more slowly. As we begin, allow your body to settle into comfort. Let your jaw unclench, let the shoulders lower, and let the breath fall into a smooth, effortless rhythm. Whatever belonged to today can remain outside this moment. It does not need you right now. Imagine the hush of early morning when the world is still hushed and pale. Imagine a soft silhouette of a bird gliding across a quiet sky, its wings barely moving. Just being with that image begins to calm the mind. Tonight we will journey through the gentle truths of birds, their patterns of flight, their ways of resting, their forms of communication, their subtle intelligence, their quiet place in the greater living world. There is something deeply soothing in their existence, something that helps us remember a slower way of being. If you feel at home in these moments of softness, I invite you to like, subscribe, or simply return whenever you need a little quiet. For now, let the mind lighten, let the breath loosen, and let yourself drift into the open sky of imagination. Let's begin. Bird wings are not simply tools of motion, but finely tuned extensions of air and bone that transform wind into lift and glide. The structure of the wing channels air in such a way that the bird does not need to force its way upward, but simply cooperates with the invisible currents around it. This harmony between form and atmosphere creates the sensation of effortlessness. When you see a bird circling quietly in a rising thermal, you're witnessing a conversation between body and sky, so natural that it requires no tension. Just trust, just glide. Some birds fly thousands of miles during migration, crossing continents and oceans, guided not by visible landmarks but by an instinctive compass stored deep within their nervous system. They sense Earth's magnetic field. They read patterns in starlight. They follow low-frequency vibrations through land and water. This quiet navigation unfolds without frustration or doubt. It is motion rooted in faith, the kind of faith that does not question direction, it simply knows. Birdsong is more than communication. It is emotional mapping. When a bird sings at dawn, it is not just marking territory, it is shaping space with sound, turning open air into a receptive chamber of resonance. Those early morning notes carry a softness that moves through leaves, through mist, through waking light. Humans hear birdsong and feel a calm shift in consciousness. It reminds us that the world is not waking with urgency, but with gentle unfolding. Feathers are astonishing structures. Each one is made of microscopic branches and veins that link together in a way that gives them softness yet strength. A feather can bend without breaking. It can compress without losing form. The surface diffuses light into subtle iridescence, so that birds appear sometimes to glow rather than shine. Holding a feather in the palm is like holding a piece of light textured into matter. Many birds sleep lightly, with half their brain awake and half dreaming. This allows them to remain alert for danger even while resting. But some species sleep while flying or drifting on air currents, dipping briefly into small moments of dreaming before rising back into awareness. Sleep becomes something fluid and gentle, not a heavy block of unconsciousness, but a soft drifting in and out of perception. When birds gather in flocks and turn in coordinated movement, the result is something that looks like living wind, thousands of bodies following invisible geometry. Each bird responds not to the flock as a whole, but to just a few neighbours nearby. This creates a ripple of motion that spreads through the group like a silent wave. Watching it is calming. It is a reminder that harmony does not require control, only understanding. Some birds glide so efficiently that they can travel long distances while using almost no energy. They do not flap constantly. They rise on warm air, then descend gradually, then rise again. This gentle pattern of motion conserves strength. It is a lesson in sustainable movement. They do not fight the world, they move with it. Bird eyes are shaped to take in an extra wide field of view. They see subtle shifts in motion that the human eye cannot track. When a bird watches a landscape from above, it sees a world of soft currents and tiny movements. The wind pushing treetops, the shimmer of water, the shift of shadow. Perception becomes panoramic. Perspective becomes global. Some birds form lifelong pair bonds. They return to the same partner year after year, flying home to familiar calls and familiar feathers. Their reunions are gentle and quiet. They greet each other not with display but with recognition. This familiarity becomes a soft anchor in their lives, a touchstone of presence amid migration and motion. And some birds exist simply as small warm sparks of life, hopping quietly on branches or picking softly through grass. Their movements are humble, their presence subtle, but their existence contributes to balance, pollinating seeds, redistributing nutrients, extending ecosystems. They do not need to be dramatic to matter. Their simplicity is their significance. Bird feathers are not only for flight, warmth and shape, but also serve as emotional and social language. Some birds have feathers that can shift slightly in orientation, changing how light moves across them. A subtle tilt of a wing, a slight puffing of the chest, or gentle smoothing of plumage can communicate reassurance, friendliness, calmness, or acceptance to another bird nearby. It is a communication quieter than sound, quieter than sight, more like a soft gesture of presence. In this way, feathers become a silent alphabet of touch and light, built into the body itself. There are places where countless birds gather in communal roosts as evening falls. As the light dims to blue and dusk deepens, flocks move together as if guided by one shared breath. They tuck their heads into their feathers and settle onto branches, rafters, or cliffs. Their collective warmth holds the night gently. If you were to stand beneath them as they sleep, you would hear tiny adjustments in feathers, faint murmurs of soft breathing, and the almost inaudible rustle of rest. It is a chorus of stillness, more calming than silence itself. Some birds have hollow bones that are incredibly strong yet astonishingly light. The hollow structure reduces weight without sacrificing resilience. Inside the bone, fine struts support the structure like miniature architectural beams, making the skeleton both enduring and airy. To imagine bone being light enough to fly, yet strong enough to support life, evokes the sensation of floating rather than standing. It gives the sense that birds are built from lightness itself, engineered not for force, but for grace. Birds navigate not only by sight and instinct, but by memory. Memory of winds, of coastlines, of star positions, of smells carried through air. They learn invisible maps that stretch across the planet, layered onto land, water and sky. These maps exist not on paper but inside the bird's neural network, becoming part of its internal world. This is migration as remembrance. A bird never feels lost, because it carries its own guidance within its body. In the early morning, when the world transitions from darkness to day, birds often greet the light with a burst of song known as the dawn chorus. This collective singing is not frantic. It is layered and timed, unfolding in soft waves, a single note here, an answering call there, gentle phrases rising into air. The world wakes not abruptly, but musically. Hearing this chorus through an open window is like feeling the earth take its first breath of the day. Some birds have specialized feathers that dampen sound, allowing them to fly almost silently. Owls, for example, pass through air with whisper-soft wings. Their predator's flight becomes undetectable, but more than that, it becomes peaceful. There is something mesmerizing about movement without noise. The owl seems to hover rather than push, slipping through space like a thought moving through the mind. Soft, continuous, unbroken. There are birds that mirror the colours of the environments they inhabit, muted browns for desert ground, mossy greens for leafy canopies, white for snowfields, charcoal grey for volcanic shores. Their coloration is not only camouflage, it is relationship. They do not stand apart from the world they belong to it. Their bodies accept the palette of the land, blending seamlessly with background. They exist as part of a whole, not as separate observers. Some birds ride the edges of storms. They sense pressure changes long before human instruments. They know when wind will rise and when it will settle. Instead of fearing turbulence, they use it sliding along moving air, letting gusts lift them higher, letting crosswinds carry them farther. Storm does not break them, it assists them. Watching this is like watching mastery of surrender, knowing how to yield and be carried instead of resisting. In certain forests, birds act as living alarms for other species. Their calls change subtly when something unusual enters the environment: a predator, a human, a sudden movement. Other animals respond to these signals instinctively, adjusting their behaviour. In this way, birds become protectors not only of themselves but of entire communities of living beings. They are guardians of awareness in places where eyes alone are not enough. And finally, there are birds for whom flight is not a performance, but a form of being. They move through sky with the same ease that fish move through water. For them, air is not resistance, it is medium. Their flight is not effort, it is existence. To witness such movement is to be reminded that freedom need not be dramatic or loud. Freedom can be quiet, steady, and peacefully assured, like wings lifting into breeze, again and again with quiet trust. There are birds that form memories of faces both human and animal, and remember kindness as well as threat. If a person feeds them gently or passes without disturbance, the bird recalls that presence as safe. If someone approaches with tension or aggression, that too is remembered. Over time, the bird builds an emotional map of others, distinguishing not just species but individuals. This memory does not create fear, it creates familiarity, recognition, trust. It shows that relationships exist even in silence, between beings who cannot speak to each other but can still understand intention. Some birds groom one another in small communal rituals, gently touching feathers with beaks in slow, affectionate motions. This behavior is not simply hygiene, it is bonding. To be groomed is to be accepted into belonging. The careful smoothing of feathers becomes a gesture of reassurance, of peace. If humans could see these exchanges closely, they would notice tenderness, the softness of beak on feather, the patience of one bird waiting as another adjusts its plumage. These quiet acts reveal that connection does not always require sound. Touch alone is enough. Bird hearts beat astonishingly fast, sometimes hundreds of times per minute, yet this intense rhythm does not create anxiety. Instead, it feeds lightness of motion. These hearts are engines of airborne existence. They allow the bird to inhabit a world of constant movement while remaining calm. It is a reminder that rapid rhythms can support serenity rather than disrupt it. The pace of the body does not always mirror the pace of the mind. The heart can beat in urgency while the spirit floats in calm. There are birds that rest on rising columns of warm air, letting invisible thermals lift them upward without a single wing beat. They spiral higher and higher, carried only by temperature and motion. From the ground it looks like magic, like levitation, but it is simply alignment. The bird and the atmosphere agree for a moment, and the result is ascent. Watching this teaches something quietly profound. Effort is not always necessary for elevation. Sometimes rising is a matter of allowing. Some birds create elaborate nests, weaving grass, twigs, root fibers, and hair into structures of remarkable precision. Inside these nests, eggs sit in warmth, protected not by stone or metal, but by softness. The nest becomes a cradle of intention, each thread placed with care, each curve shaped for comfort. When hatchlings emerge, They're greeted by this handcrafted sanctuary. It is the first architecture of their life, built not by designers, but by instinctive care. There are birds that follow ocean currents across entire hemispheres. They fly above water for weeks, rarely seeing land, guided by the shape of the waves and the smell of salt. These wanderers live in the seam between sea and sky. They land only to rest and breed. Their home is not a specific place. Their home is motion itself. To imagine sleeping with wings half folded above dark ocean expanse is to imagine existing in pure continuity, waking in flight, dreaming in air. Some birds communicate in frequencies beyond what humans can easily hear. Their calls exist in the edges of perception, faint, high, subtle. These sounds carry meaning we can only guess at, messages we cannot decode. If you sit quietly in a forest and feel a moment of sudden awareness, it may be that you are experiencing those signals not through hearing but through atmosphere, through the shift of attention in other creatures around you. There are birds that dance hopping, spinning, bowing, shaking tail feathers in soft rhythms. These dances are not random. They're invitations, greetings, displays of trust. Watching them feels like watching music given shape in motion. The movement is joyful, yet controlled. The body expresses affection, confidence, comfort. Dance becomes language, a conversation of gesture rather than speech. Some birds gather in flocks not because they must, but because presence is reassuring. The proximity of others creates a shared awareness of safety, warmth, and orientation. They move like one shape with many minds, feeling through each other. When one turns, the others follow, not from obedience, but from cohesion. This unity demonstrates that belonging can be peaceful, not restrictive. One does not dissolve into the group. One is supported by it. And finally, there are birds whose very existence reminds us that life is not bound to earth. They move between ground and sky effortlessly, living in a dimension humans can only visit with machines. Their perspective is broader, their path less constrained. When we look up and see them crossing the sky in quiet arcs, something in the mind expands. We feel a soft yearning not for escape, but for lightness, for freedom, for motion without burden. The bird becomes a metaphor for release. And as that feeling settles, sleep feels closer. Some birds glide just above the surface of water, wingtips close enough to skim reflections. This behavior, called ground effect flight, allows them to travel with less effort by riding on a cushion of compressed air between wing and surface. The bird moves as if it floats on an invisible layer of softness. Watching this, you sense a kind of intimacy between bird and ocean, as though wings touching water without wetting it. It reveals a trust in closeness, a comfort in proximity, and a willingness to move guided by subtle forces rather than brute strength. There are birds that can slow their wing beats to the point where flight becomes almost suspended, hovering in place as though air were solid. Hummingbirds do this most famously, but other species can too in their own slower ways, pausing mid-air to examine a leaf, a branch, a scent. In this hovering stillness, time feels stretched. The bird appears to be contemplating its next moment. The movement is so gentle that it feels like the body is listening to the air before deciding how to continue. Some birds possess extraordinary memory for locations, remembering specific trees or hidden cache places where seeds were stored months earlier. These birds create mental maps of hundreds of storage spots. When they return to each location and recover what they placed there, it demonstrates a quiet patience and reassurance in knowing that the future can be prepared for. The act of storing food is not anxious hoarding, but wise anticipation. It reflects a relationship with time that is both calm and confident. There are birds whose feathers contain pigments that react subtly to sunlight, changing colour throughout the day. Morning light may create muted tones, while midday brightness reveals iridescent blues, greens, or golds, and evening light deepens them into shadowed richness. The same bird seems to wear 3 different atmospheres of colour depending on the hour. This constant soft transformation gives the impression that birds carry light with them as an accessory rather than a limitation. Some birds live along cliff faces or on sheer rock walls, building nests in places that seem impossibly inaccessible. They balance on narrow ledges, cling to vertical surfaces, and tuck eggs into crevices shielded from predators. These nests feel like sanctuaries carved into stone. To imagine raising young in such a precarious place is to realize the remarkable symmetry between vulnerability and trust. The cliff becomes both cradle and fortress. Nature provides height as a form of shelter. There are birds that specialize in quiet foraging, moving slowly through reeds or foliage with almost no sound. Every step is deliberate. Every feather shift is subtle. They become nearly invisible, blending not only visually but rhythmically with their surroundings. This invisibility is not escape, it is harmony. They do not disturb the environment, they fit into it. Their presence is absorbed by the landscape like a note in a chord that blends rather than stands apart. Some birds share parental care in balanced partnership, taking turns warming eggs, feeding nestlings, guarding territory. This rotation is not transactional, it is cooperative. Each bird understands its role without instruction. They relieve one another with a gentleness that feels almost ceremonial. This shared duty strengthens their bond and gives their young a foundation of security. The rhythm of taking care and resting becomes the hidden heartbeat of a family. There are birds whose flight patterns follow invisible wind corridors high above ground. They ride on upper atmospheric streams where air travels faster and smoother than at lower levels. Human eyes cannot see these paths, but birds sense them instinctively. It is as though the sky itself contains secret roadways, open only to wings. The bird understands speed without exertion, knowing how to let the wind do the carrying. It embodies the principle that movement can be effortless when aligned with flow. Some birds produce unique calls that change depending on context, a gentle contact call to keep in touch with flock mates, a sharp alarm note when danger approaches, a soft reassuring murmur for offspring. These layered vocal ranges reveal emotional nuance. Birds do not communicate only with meaning. They communicate with feeling. Each sound carries an intention, safety, attention, comfort which travels through the air like invisible warmth. There are birds that linger in the air at sunset, soaring slowly as the light softens and shadows lengthen. They seem to time their final flight with the transition of day into night. Their silhouettes cross the fading sky with serene grace, like thoughts dissolving before sleep. Watching them quiets the mind. Their final glides are not hurried or forced. They end the day with calm closure, letting body and air come to rest together as darkness settles gently over the world. There are birds whose voices become part of the landscape in such a natural way that their calls sound like the environment speaking through them. A bird call echoes across a valley, not as an interruption, but as a continuation of the wind moving through branches. In some places, humans who walk often in those spaces begin to associate certain bird sounds with certain times of day. The song of a blackbird means morning is softening into light. The hush of owls signals that night has fully arrived. In this way, birds do not just live in the environment, they narrate it. Some birds enter a trance-like state while gliding for long periods, letting their wings lock into position and resting almost fully while airborne. The brain shifts into a lighter mode of awareness, monitoring only essential stimuli. This aerial rest is like floating within consciousness, not quite awake and not fully asleep. The bird trusts the air, trusts the wind, trusts its own instincts. To imagine resting while being carried by the sky is to imagine surrender wrapped in motion. There are birds that mimic sounds they hear in their environment, not only the songs of other birds, but the hum of insects, the rustle of leaves, even human-made sounds like whistles or machinery. This mimicry is not mockery, it is curiosity embodied. A bird explores sound like a painter explores colour. When a bird repeats a tone it has heard, it is trying on another voice, shaping the world's sonic textures into its own expression. This reveals that learning can happen through listening, not just through doing. Some birds have incredibly sharp directional hearing, allowing them to pinpoint the location of a rustle beneath snow or a movement beneath leaf litter. They can detect life through layers of quiet. Their sense of hearing is not just about sound, but about subtle difference distinguishing between the movement of wind and the movement of life. This sensory precision shows how deeply connected they are to the fabric of their surroundings, tuned not to noise, but to nuance. There are birds who spend much of their life in quiet solitude, perched on a single branch for long hours, watching the world without comment. They take in the shifting light, the sway of foliage, the distant activity of other creatures. Their quiet presence becomes a living stillness, a reminder that existence does not require constant motion or noise. Simply being can be enough. Birds teach that observation itself is a way of living. Some birds migrate along ancient routes that have been used for thousands of generations. These flight corridors are passed down not through explicit teaching, but through inherited instinct layered with gradual learning. Young birds take to the sky and follow the older ones, learning by experience. Then, years later, they lead others. This continuity creates lineage not only of genetics, but of journey, a shared inheritance of motion across time. There are birds that use tools shaping twigs, carving them with beaks, and using them to reach food hidden in crevices. Their intelligence does not express itself in complicated contraptions, but in simple, effective solutions born from attention and insight. Watching a bird solve a problem with a twig feels like witnessing creativity at its purest level, a quiet spark of cognition emerging in a being too often underestimated. Some birds form close companionships not only with other birds, but with other species: deer, buffalo, even humans in rare cases. They perch on large animals, picking insects from their fur, or follow human footsteps in gardens waiting for seeds or disturbed insects. These interspecies relationships are gentle, mutual, and grounded in trust. The bird becomes a companion, not a pet, not property, but a small friend travelling alongside another life. There are birds that rest atop tall trees or cliffs at night just to watch the horizon. These sentinel birds position themselves at vantage points, studying the sky as it shifts in colour during dusk and dawn. Their posture is calm, upright, observant. They serve as quiet watchers, a living presence on the threshold between day and night, as though marking the turning of time with their stillness. Some birds never appear hurried. Even when feeding, moving or exploring, their actions seem measured and graceful. They do not flail or rush. They perform tasks with a softness of movement that resembles fluidity more than motion. Watching them can slow your own internal tempo. It brings the mind into alignment with a slower, more natural rhythm, the rhythm of feathers settling, feet gripping bark, wings unfolding gradually into the air. There are birds that live close to water and develop a soft companionship with ripples and reflections. You'll see them standing still at the edge of a pond or lake, watching the mirrored sky beneath them. When they take a step, the reflection splits gently, then returns to stillness behind them. These birds seem to understand that the world above and the world below are both real in their own way. The surface of the water becomes a moving page of light, and the bird becomes part of an image that changes with each feather's motion. This creates an atmosphere where reality and reflection merge, and the observer feels as though they are floating in a doubled world of air and water. Some birds have calls that change not only in tone and rhythm, but also in emotional colour depending on situation. A call given during feeding is different from a call given during separation, which is different again from a reassuring call between mates, or a quiet call meaning "I'm here, where are you?" These nuanced vocal expressions show that birds experience subtle emotional states and respond with specific sound signatures. Their voices carry feeling across air communication that is understood not through grammar, but through sensation. Their language is mood more than word, tone more than meaning. There are birds that imprint upon places, not just landscapes, but very specific locations, a particular branch, a certain stretch of fence, a chosen stone ledge on a wall or cliff. They return to these spots year after year like humans returning to a childhood home. The spot becomes familiar, and familiarity becomes comfort. When they rest there, it is not random, it is ritual, a return to a spatial memory where their body knows how to relax. This teaches us something about grounding, that sometimes the mind rests most easily in places it has known for a long time. Some birds soar in spirals so slow and steady that their movement seems lazy, almost drowsy. These spirals create gentle trajectories through the sky, rising on invisible elevators of air. The bird isn't climbing, it's being carried upward by temperature differences. Watching this ascent helps the mind release the urge to force and strive. It demonstrates that rising can happen patiently, that ascent can be peaceful, that motion need not be rushed to be effective. There are birds whose flight feathers create patterns of airflow that make their motion more silent the faster they go. This is especially true of owls, but exists in smaller degrees throughout many species. Their feathers actively break and soften turbulence so that the sound fades as speed increases. This unique property is the opposite of human and machine motion. We grow louder with speed, they grow quieter. Their silence is not absence of sound, it is skill wrapped in evolution, a softness made perfect through time. Some birds tilt their heads at angles when observing objects, not because of curiosity alone, but because their visual field and depth perception are different from ours. By adjusting the angle of their head, they increase clarity and shape recognition. In that simple tilt, that tiny motion, there is intelligence expressing itself. The bird is not merely looking, it is thinking through sight, understanding through perspective. Perception becomes an active process rather than passive viewing. There are birds that build social memory within flocks. If danger appears from a certain direction, if food is found in a certain place, if shelter is discovered beneath certain trees, this information spreads through the group. The flock becomes a distributed intelligence knowledge shared across many bodies rather than centralized in one. In this way, the flock works like a living cloud of awareness, drifting across land with coordinated understanding woven throughout. Some birds take time each day to clean and align their feathers. They go through them one by one, gently straightening them with their beak. This is essential for flight, but it is also soothing to watch. The careful attention to each feather reflects a deep instinct towards self-maintenance, almost like meditation in motion. The repetition is calming, the rhythm predictable. It is a quiet ritual of order and care, an act of self-kindness written into biology. There are birds that recognize weather changes long before sky or wind reveal them to human senses. When pressure drops or temperature shifts, birds adjust behavior subtly, flying lower, seeking cover, tightening their feathers. To watch these patterns is to see weather translated into behavior before it becomes visible in atmosphere. The birds are not reacting in fear, they're adapting in calm anticipation. And there are birds whose spirits seem to remain in air even after they land. They hop lightly, perch softly, step with delicacy. Their bodies are at rest, but their energy feels weightless, as though something inside them still remembers the wind. Their presence invites you to also become lighter, to loosen the mind, to soften the breath, to inhabit a gentler state of being. There are birds whose feathers create a gentle barrier against rain, allowing water to bead off without soaking through. When rain falls onto their plumage, it gathers in rounded droplets that slide away, leaving the bird dry beneath. The feather surface is structured so intricately that moisture simply cannot cling. Watching rain gather and fall from a bird's surface is like watching stress or worry form briefly in the mind, then disappear without sinking in. Nature built them to shed discomfort, to allow what is temporary to pass right through. Some birds tuck their heads deep into their feathers while sleeping, hiding the face entirely. To an observer, it looks like the bird has disappeared into itself, becoming a small, compact sphere of warmth and rest. Inside this posture, breathing slows, heart rate softens, and the body enters deep stillness. The tuck position is a gesture of safety, a return to interiority. The bird knows how to retreat into calm in the simplest physical motion. It teaches that restoration begins by turning inward, not outward. There are birds that live so close to human habitation rooftops, balconies, lampposts that they become familiar presences without ever needing to interact directly. These birds do not fear us, nor do they rely on us. They coexist, moving through our spaces with quiet confidence. Watching them reminds us that the world we build is not separate from nature. Nature simply adapts, reshaping itself around our architecture with quiet patience. The city becomes another form of wilderness. Some birds create flight paths across valleys and canyons that act like invisible highways, passed down through generations not by teaching but by instinct reinforced through repetition. These air routes follow wind channels and echo patterns. They optimize distance and energy. When many birds travel the same path over time, the sky almost seems worn by their passage, like a groove in air. It is a reminder that travel can become ritual, and that repetition, done gently, can be graceful instead of tiring. There are birds whose feet are adapted for gripping branches so perfectly that their tendons automatically tighten when they bend their legs, allowing them to sleep without falling. The grip does not require effort. It engages naturally. Rest is supported by structure rather than strain. Imagine resting in such a way that the body holds itself without active tension, where relaxation is supported rather than resisted. Birds embody that effortless rest. Some birds exhibit remarkable patience while hunting or foraging, standing perfectly still for long periods until the exact moment arrives. This stillness is not boredom or waiting, it is readiness. The bird holds attention lightly, poised but relaxed. It does not waste energy on premature motion. Instead, it allows time to ripen. This quiet waiting is deeply calming to witness. It shows that stillness is not absence of activity, it is a refined form of it. There are birds that form lifelong imprints on certain songs, tunes heard in youth that become part of their identity. When they sing as adults, they incorporate fragments of those early melodies. In this way, birds carry memories not in images but in song. Their life story is woven into sound. Listening to them is like hearing the past echo through the present, a musical autobiography of their flight through time. Some birds inhabit saltwater coasts and have glands that allow them to drink seawater safely, expelling excess salt through specialized structures near their beaks. This adaptation allows them to live in places where fresh water is scarce. They transform what is undrinkable into nourishment. It is a quiet miracle of physiology, a reminder that limitations can become possibilities when matched with the right internal capacity. There are birds whose wings whisper against each other during flight, creating tiny rustling sounds like silk brushing skin. This sound is so intimate that it feels like hearing air being folded and unfolded. The noise is not loud enough to disturb it, it's just loud enough to notice if you're near. This soft, tactile sound evokes closeness and presence. It is a reminder that even in flight, even in movement, there can be gentleness. And there are birds who return to the same roost or nesting spot night after night, year after year, building a relationship not only with mates and flock, but with place. The branch becomes familiar beneath their feet. The view from that height becomes known. The landscape's scent, wind pattern, and light gradient become part of their inner world. This repeated return is like a deep sigh into belonging. There are birds that glide through fog and mist with a comfort that seems instinctive. never confused by the soft dimness of vision. In fog, the world becomes smaller and closer, and the bird shifts from visual navigation to sensory awareness, feeling wind pressure, listening to ambient echoes, reading subtle air currents. In this hazy realm, movement becomes deeply intuitive. The bird trusts touch and air more than sight. Watching such effortless motion through softened visibility reminds us that life does not always need clarity to continue gracefully. We can move forward even when seeing only a short distance ahead. Some birds communicate affection not through dramatic displays, but through tiny gestures, a light brush of feathers, a shared perch where bodies rest side by side, or a soft contact of beak to neck that lasts only a second. These subtle interactions reveal a kind of emotional intelligence expressed through presence rather than performance. To witness this feels like watching a quiet conversation between two beings who understand each other without needing words. It evokes a sense of calm intimacy, the kind that exists in silence and closeness. There are birds that ride ocean breezes for days without difficulty, supported by strong wings and aerodynamic bodies shaped by countless generations of adaptation. During such long journeys, their rhythm becomes steady and peaceful. They do not push against wind, they let wind carry them. They do not fly with urgency, they move with assurance. In this flow, the bird becomes almost indistinguishable from the air that holds it. The body and the element are in harmony, not competing forces, but one continuous motion. Some birds recognize individual mates or offspring by vocal signature, a particular modulation of pitch that only they produce. Amid a chorus of hundreds of calls, one note is recognizable to one specific listener. This is not coincidence, it is emotional tuning. A mother finds her chick by voice alone. A partner responds to a call out of thousands. This recognition shows that identity can be carried in tone, and connection can be anchored in sound. It is a quiet form of devotion written into the physics of vibration. There are birds in northern regions that slow their metabolism during long, cold nights, allowing their bodies to conserve energy with profound efficiency. The heart rate drops, the core temperature dips slightly, the body becomes a still furnace glowing at a slow burn. This gentle biological retreat into calm shows how rest can be strategic. The bird allows itself to settle into deeper quiet, trusting that the world will still welcome its return to movement in morning light. Some birds show protective behaviors toward their young that are tender and deliberate, shielding them from wind by expanding their body, bringing food with careful precision, guiding them with soft taps and nudges that seem almost parental in gesture. This caretaking is not frantic or anxious. It is steady and instinctive. Watching it reveals that nature holds within it a language of care older than humanity, a wordless exchange of guidance and warmth. There are birds that seek moments of solitude even within a flock, stepping away onto a branch or rock to rest alone. In these pauses, they are not isolating themselves, but simply returning to internal quiet. Their solitary perches become small sanctuaries, a place where breathing deepens and vigilance softens. After resting, they drift calmly back into community again. This small retreat and return cycle teaches that solitude and companionship are not opposing states. They are complementary forms of being. Some birds foster cooperation across species lines, sharing feeding grounds or alerting others to danger with calls that different animals understand. This interwoven alertness builds a layered safety network across the ecosystem. When one species notices a disturbance, others respond. When one relaxes, others relax. This collective awareness demonstrates how the living world is stitched together by unseen agreements, quiet contracts of mutual perception. There are birds that gather in flocks at dusk specifically to perform synchronized aerial displays before settling. They twist and ripple through the sky in waves of motion that resemble fabric flowing in wind. This dance is not choreographed. It emerges naturally from simple movement rules and shared awareness. Watching thousands of bodies move as though part of a single, Flowing consciousness creates a peaceful awe, a sense of connection that transcends individuality. And there are birds that simply exist as quiet witnesses to the passing of days from sunrise to sunset, perched or gliding or resting, observing without judgment. Their lives unfold in cycles of necessity and stillness, flight and perch, alertness and sleep. They occupy the present with complete presence. In their quiet existence, we are reminded of something essential, that life, at its simplest, is made of breathing, being, and slowly becoming. There are birds that sleep while floating lightly upon open water, their bodies rocking gently in small waves as though cradled. The water becomes a bed, the darkness a shelter. They trust the ocean to hold them, even as they rest with eyes partly closed. Their sleep is not absolute part of their awareness, listens for danger through vibration and motion, yet this half-dreaming state is peaceful. It shows how rest is possible even when the world beneath you is moving. Safety can be found in surrender, in letting the body settle into the natural rhythms of the environment around it. Some birds rely on memory maps imprinted deep in their brains, allowing them to return to the same hidden spring, the same feeding site, the same grove of trees year after year. These journeys may span hundreds or thousands of kilometers, yet the bird does not wander aimlessly. It is guided by a mental atlas created through experience. There is something deeply calming in that certainty, that instinctive trust in a remembered path. The bird does not question, it simply goes, following its inner compass with quiet confidence. There are birds whose wings make almost no sound when they fly, their feathers absorbing turbulence and friction. The silence of their motion creates an impression of weightlessness. To watch such a bird glide overhead is almost like watching a thought cross the sky. The absence of noise lets the moment feel unbroken. This quiet flight reminds us that movement can be gentle, that speed does not need aggression, and that progress can happen softly. Some birds form lifelong bonds with a single partner, returning to each other every year even after migrations and long separations. Their reunions are not dramatic, but calmer posture, a soft call, a shared space. They resume connection without negotiation or ceremony, as if love for them is simply the continuation of comfort. This enduring familiarity is soothing to witness, a reminder that sometimes the deepest connections are not loud or intense, but steady and enduring. There are birds whose feathers catch the sun in a way that creates iridescence, reflecting shifting colours that shimmer differently with every angle. This effect is not merely decoration, it is physics and structure. Microscopic layers bend and split light, transforming ordinary pigment into living rainbows. In this subtle miracle, beauty is not added from outside, it emerges from within. It invites the viewer to slow down and observe carefully, because the colours exist only for those willing to look slowly. Some birds have developed the ability to anticipate threats before they occur, reading changes in air pressure, wind pattern, or even tension within the flock. These early signals trigger gentle shifts in behaviour, a change in direction, a rise in altitude, a softening of song. This preemptive awareness shows how deeply tuned birds are to their environment. They're not reacting to danger, they're listening to the world before danger arrives. There are birds that perch on high branches and simply observe, not hunting, not communicating, not planning, just dwelling in the moment. From these vantage points, they watch the earth turn through daylight and twilight. Their stillness becomes a part of the landscape, like a leaf paused in air. This pure presence holds a quiet wisdom, that being is enough, and the act of observing is its own kind of existence. Some birds experience a form of seasonal transformation, where their internal processes shift with daylight length. Hormones change, energy levels adjust, instincts awaken or soften. This synchronization with the Earth's rotation and yearly cycle creates a deep alignment with the natural world. Their lives unfold in harmony with cosmic timing, a comfortingly rhythmic pattern embedded in biology and time. There are birds that seem to express curiosity, tilting their heads, exploring new sounds, investigating objects, watching humans with alert interest. This curiosity is not frantic or fearful, it is inquisitive and composed. Their intelligence expresses itself through attention, and in those moments of shared gaze, a small bridge forms between species, reminding us that the experience of simply wondering about the world exists across many forms of life. And there are birds that carry history in their lineage species that have persisted through ice ages, volcanic winters, shifting continents. Their survival is a quiet triumph of adaptation and patience. When we watch a bird fly, perch, or rest, we are witnessing millions of years of successful existence distilled into a single living motion. It is humbling and calming to know that such continuity endures, and that the world still holds these ancient rhythms in feathered form. There are birds that greet dawn with song not to declare territory or dominance, but to simply mark the beginning of light. Their voices rise before the sun, filling the pale air with notes that feel almost like the earth waking itself. These pre-dawn songs have no audience in mind. They are expressions of existence. The melody is soft, rhythmic, and unhurried, almost like breathing rendered in sound. When you listen to such a chorus, you feel the boundary between night and day dissolve gently, replaced by a slow, warm welcome to the returning light. Some birds maintain intricate cleanliness rituals, caring for every feather with deliberate precision. They run their beaks through plumage to align each filament, restoring structure and softness. This act is not vanity, it is preservation. A bird's feathers are its warmth, its protection, its navigation, its lift. Watching this gentle grooming evokes a quiet reminder. Maintaining oneself is an act of survival as well as comfort. It is soothing to witness such mindful attention to the body, executed with calm precision and patience. There are birds that listen deeply to the world, picking up on vibrations in branches, subtle rustling in grass, atmospheric shifts in sound that humans never notice. Their hearing extends into subtleties we cannot perceive. They experience silence differently, not as absence of noise, but as a textured field of tiny signals. For them, the quiet world is full of information. This heightened attention gives them a calm awareness that seems almost meditative, a steady listening that connects them intimately to their surroundings. Some birds inhabit the same tree or cliffside for generations, returning to familiar ground even as decades pass. Their nests become part of the architecture, layered with time-old foundations supporting new ones. This ongoing occupation creates a sense of ancestral continuity. The nest becomes a site of tradition, where life repeats its patterns gently through successive cycles. There is a soft reassurance in this stability, as though the world retains certain places of ongoing belonging. There are birds that let the wind do most of the work, barely flapping their wings at all as they soar. They find the rising pockets of warm air, ride them upward effortlessly, and then glide for long distances. Their bodies become instruments of sensation, feeling lift, tilt, and draft with moment-to-moment awareness. This style of flight demonstrates a deep acceptance of nature's assistance. The bird does not fight the wind, it collaborates with it. Some birds nest in colonies where thousands of individuals live side by side, yet there is rarely chaos. Instead, there is a soft choreography of movement, subtle spacing, small negotiations of distance, the quiet coexistence of proximity. Voices blend, spaces shared, and a kind of social equilibrium forms. Observing this harmony creates a peaceful awareness that cooperation can exist without control, and that large communities can function through instinctive mutual respect. There are birds that express joy through motion, hopping lightly, fluttering wings in a playful dance, improvising small bursts of movement that appear to serve no practical purpose. These gestures are not about survival or status. They seem to arise purely from an inner impulse toward expression. Watching them feels like witnessing a moment of pure existence movement for its own sake, play woven directly into the fabric of life. Some birds age with grace, growing quieter, calmer and more patient as the years pass. Their flight becomes smoother rather than weaker, their movements more measured. There is no rush in them, only experience stored in muscle and instinct. This dignified pacing is soothing, showing that wisdom enters through time and that aging carries its own kind of serenity. There are birds that can sleep while perched without falling, tendons locking gently when their legs bend, creating a natural grip that supports them effortlessly. Their bodies are designed for rest in vulnerability, for sleeping above ground in exposed branches. This adaptation reveals a trust in one's place within the world, a quiet faith that rest is allowed and space will hold you up. And there are birds whose presence alone brings calm, the simple sight of them, gliding overhead, or resting on a roof, or singing from a hidden branch. They do not ask for attention, yet they draw the eyes and soften the spirit. In these moments, time slows, breathing deepens, the mind drifts. The bird becomes a gentle reminder that life can be light and unburdened, that existence can be simple and peaceful, and that there is room in the world for quiet, unhurried being. There are birds that adapt their voices to their environment, shaping their song length and pitch depending on whether they live in dense forest or open grassland. In thick woods, where sound is absorbed by leaves and trunks, their notes become slower and clearer so they can travel through the green maze. In open plains, where wind carries sound differently, their melodies shift to higher tones that dance freely through spacious air. This flexibility reveals an intimate relationship between song and place. The landscape shapes the voice, and the voice becomes an echo of the surroundings, creating a kind of duet between bird and habitat. Some birds carry tiny stones or shells simply because they enjoy the sensation of holding and releasing them. They toss them up, catch them again, or drop them with deliberate motion. This behavior, observed in ravens and certain parrots, is a form of cognitive play, a celebration of curiosity. It is not about survival or necessity. It is exploration for its own sake, demonstrating a spark of inner life that feels deeply relatable. Watching these moments reminds us that intelligence doesn't always express itself in solving problems. Sometimes it appears simply in play. There are birds that remain anchored to specific geographic memories, returning to a birthplace long after leaving it behind. Even if they have travelled vast distances, seen many lands and crossed oceans, a quiet pull draws them back to the same grove, the same rocky ledge, the same sheltered corner. These places act as an emotional compass guiding their return. This fidelity to origin reveals that the concept of home exists beyond human emotion. It is a thread woven through instinct, memory, and feeling. Some birds survive winter not through migration, but through subtle efficiency, storing fat, fluffing feathers to trap warmth, and learning to be still for long periods while minimizing energy use. In this quiet endurance, they transform cold into stillness rather than suffering. The world grows silent in frost, and the bird becomes a small, steady fire of life within it, glowing in slow breath beneath the shelter of its plumage. It is a lesson in persistence through softness rather than force. There are birds that form friendships within a flock, consistently staying near specific individuals, resting beside them, flying in parallel, and engaging in shared routines. These bonds are gentle and unspoken. No dramatic signals announce them. Instead, they reveal themselves in proximity and the small comfort of choosing the same place to rest or the same direction to move. It shows us that companionship can be quiet, effortless, and simply felt. Some birds seem to understand the concept of rhythm in water. Shorebirds, for instance, know to run toward retreating waves to feed and pull back just in time as water returns. They move with the tide in a playful choreography, letting the ocean set the tempo. Their motion is not frantic. It is perfectly timed with nature's pulse. This harmony with shifting water transforms the beach into a stage of flowing movement and calm awareness. There are birds that adopt the flight formations of larger groups even when they themselves are solitary or from a different species. They slip into the slipstream of others, sharing the lifting power of the wind displacement created by many wings. In doing so, they expend less energy, gliding effortlessly in borrowed aerodynamics. This silent cooperation, often unnoticed by the flock itself, shows that mutual benefit can exist without spoken agreement carried by instinct alone. Some birds are drawn to reflective surfaces not out of vanity but fascination. They study their own reflections on windows, water, or polished objects. Their reactions vary, some greet the image, some question it, some simply watch. This encounter with the mirror self creates a soft moment of inward curiosity, as though the bird senses another presence that looks familiar but behaves differently. These quiet contemplations reveal an awareness that lies between instinct and recognition. There are birds whose hearts beat astonishingly fast during flight, hundreds of beats per minute, yet when they rest, the rhythm slows drastically, reaching a calm, steady pulse. This wide dynamic range allows them to switch between intense exertion and peaceful stillness with grace. Their bodies are living metronomes, shifting tempo according to need. In that, they embody an elegant duality, the capacity for great energy and the ability to return to deep calm. And there are birds that spend hours simply absorbing sunlight, perched in warmth with feathers loosened, eyes half closed. They allow solar heat to reach skin beneath the plumage, restoring energy softly and naturally. This sunbathing is not rushed or distracted. It is a meditation in stillness, where warmth becomes nourishment and light becomes comfort. Watching such quiet communion with daylight brings a sense of tranquility, reminding us that sometimes the simplest act of pausing in gentle warmth can feel like healing. There are birds that hear the earth itself through their feet, detecting vibrations that travel through branches, soil, or stone. Their legs act like tuning forks, picking up subtle tremors, a distant step, a shifting leaf, a small movement in the underbrush. To them, the ground is full of quiet messages. This tactile listening allows them to live in harmony with what is unseen. It is a reminder that awareness is not limited to sight or sound. Sometimes it is something felt deep in the body. Some birds preen one another as an expression of trust, gently tending to feathers on the head or neck, where the recipient cannot reach on its own. This mutual grooming is not transactional. It is an exchange of comfort. The act strengthens social bonds and creates a sense of shared calm. To witness two birds sitting close, quietly maintaining each other's feathers, is to see a small ritual of care that exists beyond language. There are birds that hatch from eggs fully trusting their world before they ever see it reacting to vibrations, warmth, and muffled voices while still inside the shell. They learn their parents' calls before emerging. Their first experience of life is not sight, it is sound and touch. This prenatal memory means that when they break into the light, it is not into unfamiliarity, it is into recognition. Some birds take short naps many times throughout the day instead of sleeping in a single long stretch. Their rest patterns are woven in and out of activity, like breaths between songs. This fragmented sleep is not a failure, it is an adaptation. It allows them to stay alert, responsive, and connected to their environment. Rest becomes integrated into life rather than separate from it, showing that sleep can be rhythmic rather than absolute. There are birds that fly inches above mirror-like water, skimming so low that their wingtips nearly touch the surface. Their reflections glide beneath them like silent twins, moving in perfect symmetry. Watching this creates an illusion of double flight, one in air, one in water. The scene holds a dreamlike quality, where reality and reflection seem to merge into one long, smooth motion. Some birds recognize the passing of seasons not just by temperature or sunlight, but by the quality of the air, its density, scent, moisture, and clarity. They can sense when winter is thinning or when spring is gathering strength. This atmospheric intuition allows them to shift behavior before humans detect change. Their lives move in anticipation rather than reaction, as though they are reading the future through the wind itself. There are birds that lead with softness even during conflict, asserting boundaries through posture and gentle vocalizations, rather than aggression. They puff slightly, lower their heads, or widen their stance. These signals communicate intention without violence. It shows that dominance in nature can manifest as calm, steady confidence rather than force. Watching such quiet negotiation reminds us that peaceful assertion is a valid and powerful language. Some birds perceive magnetic fields through tiny receptors near their eyes, allowing them to sense direction as naturally as humans sense gravity. This invisible compass guides them through migration across continents and oceans. They do not panic in wide open distances. They feel orientation in their very bones. It gives their journeys a serene certainty, a movement through space supported by nature's hidden map. There are birds that learn the songs of other species and incorporate them into their own vocal repertoire. This mimicry is not mere copying, it is a form of linguistic play, a demonstration of cognitive flexibility. They weave borrowed notes with original ones, creating musical improvisations. Their voices become tapestries of environment echoing forests, fields, cities and skies and sound. And there are birds that simply sit in evening light, allowing dusk to settle around them as the world grows blue and quiet. They do not rush to roost. They transition gently, waiting for the sky to dim into softness. In this unhurried shift from day to night, they embody the art of easing into rest. Watching them reminds us that endings need not be abrupt, they can be gradual, tender, and deeply peaceful. There are birds that perceive time differently from humans, taking in visual frames so quickly that movement appears smoother and slower to them. What looks like a blur to us is detailed motion to them, the flutter of an insect wing, the ripple of a leaf in wind, the curve of air around a branch. This heightened temporal awareness gives them an almost meditative precision in flight and landing. For them, the world moves in calm increments, not rushed flashes. Their vision grants a peaceful clarity that makes every motion intentional. Some birds can distinguish countless shades of colour beyond human capability, seeing ultraviolet wavelengths that our eyes cannot access. Flowers, feathers, and even the sky itself contain hidden patterns that are visible to them. What we see as a simple uniform tone might be layered with glowing signals and subtle gradients in their perception. Their world is not just brighter, it is more intricate, more expressive, more illuminated with secret hues. There are birds that store food for the future, hiding seeds in thousands of tiny caches scattered across their territory. Yet they remember each one with astonishing accuracy, even months later, even through snow. This memory is not frantic, but orderly, a quiet accounting of location, weight, and context. It shows a peaceful cognitive discipline, an elegant form of future planning that unfolds without anxiety or haste. Some birds communicate emotion through posture and breath rather than sound. A puffed chest, a lowered head, a loosened wing position, these signals express contentment, safety, or subtle connection. These gestures are small, nearly invisible unless one watches with patience. In their quiet body language, we see a different kind of conversation, one that happens through presence and shape rather than voice. There are birds that know how to float on thermal columns of rising warm air so efficiently that they can travel long distances without a single wing beat. They find the rising currents and ride them upward. Their bodies rest while moving. Their flight becomes a suspended glide through invisible rivers in the atmosphere. Watching such effortless soaring feels like witnessing stillness in motion. Some birds have specialized feathers that overlap like roof tiles, not only creating aerodynamic smoothness but also shedding rain with elegant efficiency. Water does not cling to them, it beads and rolls away. The feather architecture provides constant dryness and warmth, turning storms into gentle experiences rather than hardships. Their bodies carry a natural shelter. There are birds that remember human faces, distinguishing one person from another, even after long periods. They recognize who fed them, who left them alone, and who posed a threat. This ability reveals a quiet perceptiveness, an awareness that extends beyond their own kind. The bird does not live in isolation, it is in relationship with everything it regularly encounters. Some birds produce sounds not with their voice, but with their feathers, creating subtle whirs, hums, or whistles when air passes through specific formations during flight. The sound is woven into their movement, like a signature inscribed in wind. These soft wing tones become part of the social and environmental soundscape, adding gentle layers to the auditory world around them. There are birds that build nests which sway safely in wind, anchored with flexibility rather than rigidity. The nest bends but does not break, rocking like a cradle suspended in the sky. This design is not accidental. It is a form of intuitive engineering passed down through countless generations. The structure itself embodies resilience through softness. And there are birds that allow themselves long moments of stillness on quiet mornings, sitting in the first light with feathers warming slowly in the sun. They are not feeding, not alert, not active, just absorbing the world gently. In that slow, sunlit pause, they exist without urgency or expectation. Their calm presence becomes a reminder that life allows space for restful being, that there is wisdom in simply resting in the light that finds you. As our quiet journey among these feathered beings comes to an end, allow your mind to rest in the softness that birds carry so effortlessly. They move through life with a kind of trust in air and instinct, letting wind support them and letting the earth guide them. Their songs, their silences, their flights, and their stillness all have a way of quieting something inside us. When we watch them, or even imagine them, some part of us grows lighter. In every tiny heartbeat, in every soft lift of wing, birds remind us that life can be graceful and unforced. They do not hurry toward tomorrow or replay yesterday. They exist in the immediate moment with presence and ease. And as you drift into sleep, you might hold just a little of that simplicity, the sense that you too are allowed to rest without effort. Thank you for spending this time with the Sleepy Scientist. If these soft explorations give you peace or help you sleep, I invite you to subscribe or leave a small thought below. It is calming to know that others share this quiet space with us, one restful listener at a time. Now let the mind unclench. Let the breath become slow. Let sleep come gently. You have nothing to do now, nothing to hold, just rest. Good night.